Hey guys, it's Jack. I wanted to let you know that we're starting a new push for subscriptions here on Human Events Daily. So make sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you hit subscribe, you download it, and you share it with 5 of your friends. Make sure they're all going and downloading as well, because we need to get the signal out as much as possible. Look, we've done so much over the past couple of years since this show started, and we're only going to do so much more. Let's get it. This is what happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
This morning, Democrats in Maine officially tapping Troy Jackson as their pick to replace scandal-plagued Graham Plattner, who dropped out earlier this month after an ex-girlfriend accused him of sexual assault, which he denies.
I humbly ask for your vote.
Protesters in New York City this weekend condemning Mayor Zohran Mamdani just days after 2 men were stabbed in a pair of alleged hate crimes. The suspect allegedly yelled "Allah Akbar" as he stabbed the men. One of the victims was Jewish and had just left a synagogue.
Ukrainian President Zelensky is set to meet President Trump at the White House tomorrow. This as Iran issues a warning to Kyiv over strikes on Iranian vessels in the Caspian Sea. Tehran's foreign minister saying, quote, Zelensky has attacked an Iranian commercial vessel, killing a sailor, a blatant UN charter violation done at Israel's behest to drag Europe into its war. In calls, we made it clear that what the freeloader in Kyiv did cannot go unanswered.
Tonight, the war between the United States and Iran appears on pause. No U.S. strikes have been reported since Friday.
Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen showed what they say was the shoot-down of a Saudi drone as spillover tensions rise in the Red Sea. But the Strait of Hormuz has been relatively quiet over the weekend.
We are locked and loaded.
UN Ambassador Mike Waltz said U.S. forces remain at the ready, but that the president decided to pause nightly airstrikes.
He's giving talks some space. He's giving it a little bit of room. We've had both Oman and Iran and a number of our other negotiators engaged at every level.
Tensions are high in the Middle East as the White House insists all options remain on the table for Iran after the U.S. elected not to strike again last night.
But it comes as reports suggest Iran's new supreme leader is more interested in building a nuclear weapon than his late father.
Virtually everything they have has been knocked out now. Their missile count is going way down. Amazingly, they're hitting countries that
Look what we've done here.
I know.
I almost cried.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how long have we been pushing this?
Well, I mean, you've been pushing this for years, right?
Right. It's here. I talked to Trump this morning.
It's literally...
Oh, he's Jack.
Yeah.
It's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, you know, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges. But President Trump, when he gets into the zone, he listens, he asks good questions, you know, no tweeting. He has done he hadn't tweeted much at all, no drama. He's been a great wartime president. I said last night that Trump and Bibi are like Roosevelt and Churchill. I mean, they're the right two guys to confront this evil.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live here, Human Events Daily. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events. Today is July 27th, 2026, Anno Domini. And the breaking news that's coming out is that Zelensky and Netanyahu are going to be visiting the White House tomorrow. And I don't know about you, but I just saw that video of Lindsey Graham and how he was giddy and laughing and excited about the prospect of America going to war with Iran. And I don't know about you guys, but, and I'm certainly not going to disrespect someone who just passed away in that sense, but on a very real level, on a very personal level, I felt sick to my stomach watching that Lindsey Graham video. And let me tell you why. Because every single one of those aircraft carriers that goes over, That's 5,000 American sailors being put in harm's way. That's kids, that's sons and daughters of the American people that are sent over. You're putting American troops in harm's way, many of whom have come back in flag-draped coffins. And you're laughing about it, and you're giddy, and you're talking about how great it is. No, war is serious business. And this is not the way that you conduct yourself. And by the way, he knew he was on camera when he did this. And it made me very disgusted. Made me very disgusted as a veteran, made me disgusted as an American, and it just made me disgusted as a human being watching someone be giddy about that. And then we got this new meeting, right? So Zelensky and Netanyahu are coming to the White House tomorrow. And so what are the optics there? So the optics there are, does that mean these two wars are going to be combined? Now, we've certainly seen that the attack in the Caspian Sea over the weekend, where Ukraine attacked Iran in the Caspian Sea, the shipment that was heading north to the Russians, I'm guessing with some kind of supplies, some kind of drones maybe, that were headed up. What is the GOP offering? Because we've got the DSA out there saying, hey, we're going to give you free groceries and we're going to give you free everything under the sun. And look, I get it. That's communism, that's socialism. It's not going to work. But understand what I'm saying. What is the GOP's plan to offer anyone anything or voters anything going into the 2026 elections? Because right now, all the optics is that we're going to be offering more of this. More of your grocery prices going up, more of your gas prices going up, and more of foreign policy being put ahead of the domestic agenda. And that's not good for 2026. It's not good at all. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice.
In our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Well, every day, more and more of our personal information ends up online than most people realize. Your name, your home address, your phone number, family members, old addresses, email addresses, even information from the past data breaches is often just a few clicks away. Hundreds of data broker websites collect and publish that information, and unless you take action, it stays there. Some with bad intentions can use those details to piece together where you live, who you're related to, and other personal information. If you're politically active, work in the media, or simply value your family's privacy, it's worth taking seriously. That's where Patriot Protect comes in. Patriot Protect works to remove your personal information from data broker websites before the wrong people can use it. Instead of waiting until after you've become a victim, they help make you much harder to find in the first place. A single phone scam or identity theft incident can cost thousands of dollars. Protecting yourself is a lot less expensive. Go to patriot-protect.com/POSO. Use promo code POSO to save 15%. Take control of your privacy, add some digital camouflage to your life, and make yourself much harder to find online. All right, very excited to bring on our next guest. He's highly respected. He is, in fact, a writer and podcaster. His IQ is listed here as 187, and I'm not reading that online. I'm reading that in the Guinness Book of IQ lists. His height is listed at 6'2", which I can confirm because I have met him in reality. He is the author of the new book, White Pill, The Online Right and the Making of Trump's Identity. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Greer joins Human Events. What's up, Scott?
Thanks for having me, Jack. That's a great introduction. And yes, the IQ is listed as 187. They used to allow that IQ back when you only were awarded the verified badges. So old Twitter verified it, so it has to be true.
No, I don't see any community note either, so it must be true.
No, and they tried to fact check it a few years ago over a joke post I had. There was like Mary Sue, these lefty rags, and they did not find enough evidence to fact check it. So it must be true.
I actually on my old man, that would be a huge aside, but I actually have a little bit of history with the Mary Sue from like over a decade ago on my old Game of Thrones podcast, back in the good old days when all we did was talk about media. But Scott, you've got the new book out called "The White Pill: The Online Right and the Making of Trump's America," and I couldn't help but think of how the Shiloh Hendricks case and the way that it's played out online. And I wouldn't say that it's really gone beyond the online sphere quite yet. I haven't seen any like mainstream Republican politicians bring it up. I may have missed one or two, but I haven't seen it as such yet. But something like this, 10 years ago would have been something that maybe got a couple of tweets about. Now you're getting posts from Elon Musk about it. You're getting trends on Twitter. How did we get to a point where something like that, and she raised, just under $1 million in terms of her defense. How do we get from a point where stuff like, basically posting videos like this would get you banned to stuff like this, where there's actually a real backlash to, again, this Shiloh Hendricks charges and now conviction?
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point about how this would have played out a decade ago. You only have to go back a few years ago to where there was the Karen epidemic, that they were worried about all these Karens out there who cared about their community and were reporting people who might be up to no good. And what would happen is that a Karen would just be a standard white woman. She would have a problem with some type of minority group, and they would be confronting her. And then she's like, a lot of times they were making noise disturbances, or they were in places that there were strangers in an apartment building, and they're like, who are you? And they basically gave a crap about what's going on in their community, or they're acting suspiciously in a store, and then they call the police. But then the alleged victims of these Karens would then pull out their cell phone and record a video, and they never used any type of racial slur, no harmful language, and then they would be called out and attacked. And there was the famous Central Park bird watcher story where the Central Park Karen, where her and a black man got into an argument, which happens every day. This happens all the time. People get in arguments. So you can go walk outside your house. You're going to see strangers get in an argument over a parking space or whatever. That just happens in America. But if you're a white woman and you get in an argument with a black man or any type of minority or a white man, you could be the next great racist that is displayed on the internet simply because how you act is that, oh, you're confronting me. It must be because you hate me because I'm black. And in the Central Park Karen story, this woman was having an argument over, over how the bird watcher was interacting with her dog. He was acting in an aggressive manner. He was acting in the wrong. Generally, these stories, there's somebody else acting wrong. And then she merely called the cops on him over this disagreement, and her whole life was ruined. Now compare this to last year with Shiloh Hendricks, which Shiloh Hendricks used the word that we consider the worst word among the American public. That is what people, social taboo around it. And it's over the Somalis who are harassing her and her kid. There was a 9-year-old child who stole something from her purse or her bag. And then she, was probably having a bad day, used the word against him. And then this Somali comes up to her, who's an older man, who's got a troubled legal history, comes up to her with a cell phone camera and demands that she say that word again, and is aggravating her and harassing her. And simply for saying that, she's turned into the great villain, even though the guy was asking for it because he wanted to ruin her. He knew if he caught it on camera that her life would be over, that he could, present himself as a victim. It's like, oh, I was so scared that this woman who is smaller than me used that word. I felt afraid of my life. And this is how a lot of these stories played out with the Karens. But the internet is sick of that, is that people have seen this play out time and time again, that somebody could go up to you, harass you, start an argument with you, they be in the wrong, but simply because you're white and they're the ones recording the footage, that they become the victim, and that person becomes the next great villain and the next great target of the 15 minutes of hate. And so people got tired of it. And when Shiloh Hendricks first came out, we now have a free speech zone on X, and people were sick of it. And people decided to rally around her once they heard the true story of that these Somalis were bothering her and her family, were stealing her stuff. And, people lose it. They have bad days. They're not going to use the nicest language possible. And you shouldn't have your life ruined simply for using a word. We live in a country that respects free speech, that is supposed to uphold that. We're in a democratic society. We're supposed to withstand these words. And we shouldn't have the standard where if you use a certain word, that's a crime. And even what happened with the justice system, it is a travesty that she was found guilty of anything. I don't know how it's disorderly conduct to use that word to, the guy who was taking video footage of her. This guy's harassing her, demanding she say that. Then they're saying this is fighting words, but there was no fight that occurred. This is just an argument between two people. How is this disorderly conduct? And it's why even, nonpartisan civil liberties groups like FIRE view this conviction as a travesty, and hopefully it's overturned on appeal. And it should be. But the fact that she has so much support on the internet, that's not with the general public. I understand why mainstream Republican politicians don't come to it because, the social taboo around that is that generally normies are going to be like, feel that there's something wrong even with saying it. It should be a crime, even though it's not a crime. So there's a reason why the normie Republican politicians don't come to it. But the fact that mainstream conservative commentators and Elon Musk rush to her defense and see this as a free speech case is certainly positive development for what we saw in the 2010s.
Well, I think it is. And it speaks to the thesis of your book that things like this, conversations like this, issues like this, that used to really be relegated to, sort of like certain corners of the internet sphere, 4chan or whatever have you, that they've really become much more mainstream. Obviously not specific free speech cases like this, but free speech in general. And just the idea of the prominence of talking about immigration, where, again, things like that used to get you banned, talking about certain aspects of illegal alien violence or black crime in cities, things like that used to be grounds for getting you suspended online. And now you really do hear more on this and going on from the mainstream. So it's cliche to say, okay, the Overton window has shifted. But what you actually do in the book is you lay out a systematic, tell the story, really. You just tell the story of how this all began.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the free speech case that you mentioned. It is things about immigration. And when I first got into conservatism in 2013, it was controversial to stand against illegal immigration. I know of a guy who was threatened to get fired from his job. He worked at some conservative group because he made a tweet opposed to illegal immigration, opposed to amnesty, which that group didn't want to be affiliated with. Now you have mainstream Republican politicians calling to restrict legal immigration. There's a bill in Congress that seeks to overturn the Hart-Celler Act, which, the 1965 Immigration Act that got us in this mess. No one was talking about that in 2013. No one was talking about that pre-Trump. It was enough to be hardcore right-wing to stand against amnesty. And even a lot of those guys who are standing against amnesty were like, we need to somehow increase legal immigration. So the story is how that the only people really talking about this is something I call the online right, where people, anonymous commentators, people on Twitter, we'll call them posters here, and some people who are using trolling to get these points across. And that was the only way to get it across because the mainstream conservative movement wasn't discussing these things. And the way they were able to get this attention towards these topics was creating controversy on the internet. Well, back in the old days of Twitter, a reporter could just post something nonsense about how Republicans are racist or immigration is a great thing. And then some anonymous person would post some, aggressive response. And this reporter would get so worked up about it that they decided this is a whole epidemic, that they're finally getting their lies and their distortions.
No, and it was completely nuts. Scott, give us 1 second because we're going to go for a break, and I want to dig into this a little bit more when we come around the corner here on Real America's Voice. We're with Scott Greer, the author of The White Pill. And of course, the white pill means being hopeful, folks. So we are going to talk about something hopeful here when we come back.
We talk about influencers. These are influencers. And they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, who's done a great job.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily. Got a shot there. President Trump checking out some Jeeps. President Trump checking out some equipment there in Michigan. He's going to be speaking in a little bit later. So Real America's Voice, of course, is going to cover that and bring you those remarks in full after he finishes this site visit there to the great state of Michigan. We are on with Scott Greer. He's our guest today. His book is The White Pill, The Online Right and the Making of Trump's America. And Scott, I want to give you the floor here a little bit to kind of walk this out, because you're explaining how so many of these things that we're talking about, and I use the Shiloh Hendricks example because it's in the news, but so many of these topics used to be things that were totally taboo to talk about in, the 2012 to 2014, to like sort of the McCain-Romney era of the GOP and the conservative movement. And now they just dominate the discussion. And I think that's something that a lot of people who maybe got into politics in 2024, they don't quite understand just how bad it was not really that long ago.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what my book aims to tell. And people don't understand that, like, nobody was discussing this. I was talking about this in the previous segment, but yeah, nobody was talking about illegal immigration. They were barely talking about illegal immigration. And when they did, it was divided over between people who were opposed to amnesty and those who were for amnesty. They were not talking about anti-white racism. They weren't talking about DEI. Well, I mean, DEI wasn't even that mainstream known, but these ideas and these notions were out there. And it's something I covered in my first book, No Campus for White Men, about how anti-white racism is taking over college campuses. And then we soon saw that take over the entire country with the George Floyd revolution and all this nonsense post 2020. And then became a backlash towards it. And the way that this stuff was able to be mainstream was through the internet. And it was through mainstream commentators like Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk picking up on these ideas and then broadcasting them to a much larger audience. Tucker Carlson in the late 2010s, early 2020s had the #1 cable news show. And now no longer were these ideas relegated to the dark corners of the internet, but they were broadcast to millions of homes through Tucker Carlson monologues. And he made people aware of topics that they would have never heard of before, such as the Great Replacement, anti-white violence in South Africa, which now has led to the Trump administration granting refugee status to Afrikaners, the dangers of legal immigration, not just illegal immigration, and numerous other topics that they would have never been made aware of if it wasn't for Tucker Carlson bringing them to their homes. And then other people took this up, such as Charlie Kirk and TPUSA. And Charlie Kirk was head of the largest student youth group. TPUSA is still the largest student youth group. And he was able to broadcast these ideas to a much larger audience than they were before when they were just relegated to the internet. And it's also captured the imaginations and the worldviews of young conservatives. So it is going to still remain the future of the conservatism in America. And some people get very black pilled about it, as for some of your audience knows, is black pill is the opposite of white pill. And it's a sign that we know this stuff, but it's never going to get better. It's only going to get worse. But I think that's the opposite. If you had more grounds for thinking that in, say, 2015 than you do today, as that more people are aware of these issues, there's much more freedom to discuss these issues than ever before. I mean, we have the world's wealthiest man, but disregard the president who's saying this stuff. Obviously, the president is saying this stuff, but we have the world's wealthiest man broadcasting these ideas to the public. So that's a big win that we wouldn't have had in the past. And I think if you told people how we're operating right now in 2014, you went back in the past and told them about this, they would have thought we won. Now haven't quite won yet, but compared to where we were in 2014, it's certainly a white pill.
No, I agree. And I've said for a long time and will continue to say that the greatest contribution that Elon has made to all of politics beyond anything else he did in 2024 was simply taking over X to give conservatives and libertarians and immigration restrictionists, nationalists, whoever, just the ability to have that asymmetric advantage, or at least to fight back against the asymmetric advantage that the mainstream media had for so long. Because now here's a place where, and even Elon himself, by the way, was, caught up in a lot of these debates over legal immigration. But the fact that that debate was able to be had in public, the great Christmas War of 2024, is just something that's far beyond anything that we saw going back to, again, that McCain-Romney era. And that's why, I feel so I feel so apprehensive that people want to bring it back, and they say, "Oh, after Trump, we can, just go back to the way things were before." Like, I don't think any of this is going back to the way things were before ever.
No, they're definitely not, because the only way that they can keep the base on side is to discuss these issues. They're not going to be fired up like back in the Tea Party days, where like if you wanted to be the most right wing guy, you're like, I want to cut the Department of Interior, or I really am opposed to the Export Import Bank, which this is how silly things were in like the early 2010s. Like being opposed to the Export Import Bank was a sign of how far right you were, which no one cares about these topics unless people who are personally involved in them. And in order to get the base motivated, they're going to have to discuss immigration, anti-white racism, and take on a combative side against wokeness and the left. They just can't return back to caring about fiscal conservatism and then promising more foreign wars. They have to deliver on a domestic agenda that is designed for the base. And those young people who are going to be shaping the American right and conservatism for the future, they're not going to suddenly ditch these ideas and embrace John McCainism or Paul Ryanism, in the next few years. They're going to be tied to these ideas for a long time.
No, it's not going to happen. And ultimately it's like, what are we trying to do? We're just trying to have a discussion. Meanwhile, it's like they're worried about you're not allowed to say certain words or something. Meanwhile, we're sitting over here literally dodging bullets from leftists, the president having to dodge bullets on a regular basis when he goes anywhere now. So that's kind of the point of where we're at. I think that's one of the reasons that the violence is ratcheting up, by the way, because they've lost this soft power asymmetry that they had before. Scott Greer, once again, tell people where they can go to follow you and where they can go to get white-pilled.
You can follow me on X at Scott M. Greer, and you can follow my work at Substack, highly-respected.com. And you can buy my book at Amazon now, or if you want to buy it straight from the publisher, at passage.press. And the book's title is, again, White Pill, The Online Right and the Making of Trump's America.
Just so incredible, folks. I think this is the most highly respected guest we've ever had here on the program. Go give him a follow. Check out the book, White Pill. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice.
Where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live here, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Folks, we know that the president is making his way to the rally stage very soon here up in Michigan. So we, of course, at Real America's Voice will bring that to you. If he comes on before the end of my show, of course, we'll go right to him as we always do. But before we get started, I want to thank Allegiance Gold for making this coverage possible. Producing coverage like we do takes a lot behind the scenes, and we're grateful for partners like Allegiance Gold who help make it happen. It also reminds me that security means different things to different people, whether it's stories we're covering or the decisions we make for our own families. It's important to think about protecting what we've worked hard to build. That's why I'm especially thankful for Allegiance Gold. We've been working together for the past 5 years, and relationships like that aren't built overnight. They're built on trust, consistency, and showing up for each other. We appreciate their support, and we're proud to have them standing with us. If you'd like to learn more, visit protectwithposo.com. That's protectwithposo.com, or call 844-577-POSO to learn more. All right, folks, very excited to have on our next guest. He's a senior editor over at the American Conservative. Luke Nicastro joins us now. Luke, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Jack.
Yeah, well, I saw your interview the other day with War Room talking about this section, 219 in the NDAA and merging the U.S. military and the Israeli military, and looking at some of these things. And as a prior intelligence officer myself, really wary of integrating the United States with any foreign military, even if it is, and keep in mind that Israel's not in Five Eyes, they're not in NATO, they're not in a number of these intelligence sharing frameworks that we normally have. Not to say that we don't share intelligence with them, but again, this is going to come up. And plus, and one of the reasons for that, by the way, is because a lot of the technology transfer that they have with China. That's always been one of the main reasons. They also have a relationship with Russia as well. It's one of the main reasons that we've always been very careful with what we share with them. But, now we come to see, and, putting this all together, I see the stomach churning Lindsey Graham video that came out the other day. And now we see that Zelensky and Netanyahu are both arriving at the White House tomorrow. And it's been my sort of, I don't know, theory or, perhaps reading the tea leaves here. Does it seem like there is a formulation going on to try to combine the Ukraine war and the Iran conflict?
Yes, I think that is absolutely something that is underway. I think you see it in a lot of different dimensions. I mean, one is that Ukraine allegedly struck an Iran-linked vessel in the Caspian Sea over the weekend, which is kind of like Zelensky's effort to really sort of fuse these wars together and to make the case that the United States should enter the Ukraine war more as a co-belligerent by tying it again to this struggle that we're already enmeshed in with Iran. I also think you see it happening in Congress, because while Zelensky comes to the White House, he will also allegedly be meeting, or apparently rather, be meeting with senators ahead of this big Russia and Iran sanctions bill that's currently moving through the Senate. So I think it is a very deliberate and concerted effort to merge these two conflicts that you're seeing.
Yeah, when I saw that open up in the Caspian Sea, and I had to read the news a couple of times. I said, wait a minute. So Israel struck an Iranian supply ship in the Caspian Sea. And map break, we do have it up so folks can see that this is across the Caucasus from the Black Sea. So totally, pretty far afield for the Ukrainians. They have been conducting more long-range strikes over the past year or so. And we've certainly seen that situation turn into a stalemate. There's no question. But this seems like a new front opening up, not just, and of course, I'm sure he'll say, well, this is just, we're attacking Russian supply lines. But at the same time, we know that Israel, the United States, and Iran are embroiled in this conflict. And it seems to me like he's trying to get in on the game.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think Zelensky is a canny operator, and, he has been trying to get the United States ever more directly involved in this war since it began. And I understand that from his perspective, but, we have our own sort of discrete set of national interests. And so, you have to look at this and understand sort of the motivations that are driving it.
No, and it makes sense because from his perspective, because as I say, that it does appear to have turned into a stalemate, and, credit where it's due, that is, I think that Russia has vastly underperformed their expectations, particularly for 2026. We didn't see any major breakouts in the spring. We haven't seen any in the summer thus far. They have been Ukraine has been conducting more long-range strikes into Russia. But at the same time, I don't think there's much appetite from the American people for more involvement with Ukraine. So it seems to me as though Zelensky is making a play directly for the president.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think the timing is also interesting because, as you know, we're in the middle of this pause, right, on strikes against Iran. And the president has spoken to reporters several times today, basically saying that the reason for this pause is to give negotiators the space to see if we can't get diplomacy moving again. And so, it does raise this question of what happens if the Iran conflict is or moves closer to a diplomatic resolution. Is this play going to work out? Obviously, as I said earlier, it's partly tied to the momentum of this bill for additional sanctions in the Senate. And I think that it's just very uncertain whether this play, which I agree with you, is being made directly, it's a sort of an appeal being made directly to the president of the United States, whether it is going to pan out for Zelensky.
Well, and that creates a huge problem because this is something where if you're the United States, and the president obviously has talked about this, he took a question about it earlier regarding whether or not, some of these questions about is Russia supplying intelligence to the Iranians, although I would point out that we publicly know that the Chinese with their Beidou satellite system is absolutely providing targeting data on our aircraft carriers and more to the Iranians, that if this were to escalate into such a way, this would be a way that Iran's military allies like Russia would potentially come into the conflict, which is something that we know that the generals have absolutely been warning against. This is one of the reasons that you saw Dan Kane and others at the Pentagon saying that, look, we need to take this operational pause, not just to assess what the battle damage is in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, in terms of the targets, and whether or not they've been totally neutralized, but also because this question of the shortage of Patriot missiles, the shortage of interceptors, which is something I've been talking about on this program since day one, that, you know, these things cannot, you cannot conduct these operations unilaterally. You cannot conduct them indefinitely. And they come with real costs and real risks. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, I found it personally so appalling to see Lindsey Graham so giddy when he knew that Americans were going into harm's way.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem. I mean, I think you're exactly right to hit on the shortage of munitions. We saw a lot of press coverage of this over the weekend, actually. There was a report that the Wall Street Journal put out that sort of described how at the highest levels of Pentagon leadership, you've got Chairman Kane and CENTCOM Commander Brad Cooper talking about the trade-offs with respect to the use of munitions if we're going to kind of continue these operations. And I'll remind you, too, that, you know, this was one of the cardinal or central objections to the deepening involvement that the Biden administration was pursuing with Ukraine, was that we were basically giving away the farm when it came to our own stockpiles of munitions. And the reality is that, you know, we have the most powerful military in human history, but we are not omnipotent. We are not invincible. We have real sort of constraints that we have to observe and be cognizant of. And as we think about the potential for conflicts or threats to emerge in other areas, and obviously China is always going to be kind of number one in that calculus, you know, we have to be thinking very, very strategically and very, very sort of very much in what IR theorists would call like realist terms about what the constraints of our power are and where it makes the most sense to really kind of focus our strategic efforts.
No, there's no question about that, because we do have serious threats from China. We have serious threats on the potential of an outbreak there with Taiwan, which we already know that we've dropped a number of our interceptors in that area. This is one of the issues with imperial overstretch, that eventually you get into the finite resources allotment of reality. And that's just reality is. We also know that we've dropped interceptor coverage of South Korea. So should North Korea make any attempt on the South, then they would be able to do so with a lot more impunity than before. Obviously, we have ballistic missile defense from other platforms in the region, our Arleigh Burke destroyers, and a number of the technology that we've given the Japanese. But still, this creates so many issues. Looks like we're going to have to be just out of time here because the president is going to come up and be speaking. I'd love to get you on later in the week when we have a little bit more time. We're not up against the president. Tell people what your coordinates are.
So I'm senior editor at the American Conservative. You can follow the American Conservative on X. You can also follow me on X at Luke_Nicastro.
All right. Thanks so much, Luke. Appreciate it. Jack Posobiec right back. Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. President Trump speaking soon in Michigan.
This is the Jack Posobiec Appreciation Hour. I can say confidently, I think Josh Shapiro would be the vice presidential nominee if it wasn't for Jack Posobiec. And that is, I'm being honest.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Folks, what if the people who were once called conspiracy theorists turned out to be right yet again? A new study out of Korea is raising fresh concerns. Researchers say COVID vaccines may be linked to higher risk of 6 cancers, including lung, breast, and prostate cancer. The study looked at health records from more than 8.4 million adults between 2021 and 2023, and it was published in the journal Biomarker Research. Critics are already pushing back, but the findings are getting attention because they suggest spike protein exposure could be tied to longer-term health risks. Dr. Peter McCullough has been sounding the alarm on this since 2020. That's one reason he worked with the wellness company to create Ultimate Spike Detox, a formula designed to help support your body's natural response with ingredients like nattokinase, dandelion root, and bromelain. Don't wait until something feels off. Take a proactive step today and get back to that pre-COVID feeling. Go to twc.health/POSO and use promo code POSO for 10% off plus free shipping. All right, folks, we know now, of course, President Trump is coming up very soon. I want to go now live to Real America's Voice's own our resident, our top Michigander, as they say, Steve Gruber is there on the ground. Steve.
Jack, nice to see you today. Boy, what a packed house we have.
It's incredible. So walk me through. Tell me exactly what's going on. Put people in the room. Where are we at, and what is the president expected to speak about?
Well, the president's going to talk about the automotive industry and returning factories here to the United States from places like Mexico and elsewhere. The point of this gathering is to talk about the automotive industry, which the big three in America, most people don't realize, have fallen to 36% of the automobiles sold in America come from Ford, GM, and Chrysler. Remarkable, really, when you think about me growing up in Michigan. I'm from here, as you pointed out. Now, we dominated the market back then, even with cars that weren't as good as they are today. But here's what's remarkable, Jack. You can see the crowd behind me. It goes twice as big all the way to the back of the room. These are auto workers. The union heads can go ahead and endorse whatever Democrat they want. The rank and file people like Brian Panebecker, who you've seen many times, I expect him on stage here again today. Look, these people are rank and file workers. They believe in the message that Donald Trump is delivering. They believe that he's bringing factories back to America, even factories from places like Toyota, $3.5 billion. The Toyota just put into a factory they're going to build here in America. More American factories, more American jobs, more American-built cars, and that's why this place is filled with the rank and file. The blue-collar workers that once were dominated by Democrats and were Democrat voters, those days are gone. I mean, you look around this room, it is absolutely standing room only, and these are working-class people here to hear their president talk about working-class issues and concerns.
And Steve, let me ask you this. When it comes to something like the issue of China, this is something that I'll never forget covering Trump rallies up in Michigan and talking to the workers up there. China isn't just another issue for them, is it? It's actually an existential threat to their way of life.
Well, it is. Let's do a compare and contrast, Jack. Mark Carney up in Canada just gave the green light to 70,000 EVs to flood into Canada from China. President Trump says, no, we're going to end bringing those cars into America. Look, China is our chief economic competitor on the world stage. Trump gets that. These people get that. And so when Mark Carney says, let them all in, and Donald Trump says, absolutely not, plus we'll throw some tariffs in there for good measure, these people recognize that. It's their livelihood, because it's not just the auto workers, it's all the peripheral businesses that go with it, the suppliers, the restaurants, the grocery stores, everything that goes with that economy. Here in Michigan and other big auto states, it's important, and they get it. And they know that Donald Trump's going to bat for them. And again, blocking those EVs from China, big move. It protects companies like Tesla and General Motors and Ford and Chrysler that all make EVs or hybrids. This is their future, and they know it.
Look, you know, Steve, I'll even have to tell you, give a little report. You know, I just got back from London, and we are seeing now there's Chinese cars all over the streets, the BYDs, the Geelys, the EVs, everything out there, and they're bringing their A game. They're absolutely bringing their A game. They're trying to flood the zone, and I did a little bit of digging while I was over there. They're all over Europe, and they're absolutely eating away at American and even Japanese auto sales in Europe, because they're undercutting everyone in terms of how cheap the cars are. Now, it wouldn't surprise me for a second that all of those cars probably are national security threats, and certainly that's why they want them in places like Washington, D.C. But I think the president understands this, and that's one of the reasons that he's highlighting this, because this is going to be a direct competition with the United States. And I'll just say it, China is bringing their A game when it comes to the auto market.
Well, they are, and this is how they operate, Jack. You know this. They'll pick an industry, whatever industry it might be. It might be pharmaceuticals, and they will go and they'll undercut the market until everybody else is out of business and bankrupt. Then they control that market. They're trying to do the same game right here with automobiles. And the point you make about security threats is very real. Just imagine if you had all the Uber drivers in Washington, D.C. and New York driving Chinese EVs, scooping up all that information. Taking all that information off your phone, taking all that information about every passenger that gets in and out of a car. That's not far-fetched. That's not science fiction. That's real. And the Chinese are on the cutting edge of a lot of that technology, as you know and as I know. And so that's a national security threat as well. And so the president recognizes that. And so China has infiltrated a lot of places. Look, one of the places I think the president should maybe rethink his policy is how many of these Chinese students are in America. What do we have, 500,000, 600,000, whatever the number is? Look, they all make a deal with the CCP before they come here and get into class and get enrolled, and then hijack all of our, our studies, our technology, our information. It goes straight back to China. Everybody knows that. They just don't want to admit it.
Well, Steve, that's exactly right. Plus, we know that there's now the information regarding China interfering with the 2020 election. The president has made that plain. He's declassified the documents along with Bill Pulte and the task force that's being headed by John Solomon. One of the first things that I said that the president could do immediately, slap those tariffs on China, ratchet them up to 1,000%, and then boot all the Chinese guest workers, all the Chinese students, just give them the boot. You could do that unilaterally on national security grounds, not to mention all of what I believe are the unfinished business of cleaning up and getting some kind of retribution for COVID-19. We've got the Fauci diaries now. And additionally, the fact that we know for certain that the Chinese are providing the Iranians with targeting information of our aircraft carriers and our bases because they've been doing it publicly. And it seems to me, and I'll just, I'll let you take the lead on that. But it seems to me like China would be a ripe subject for the president to get into here in Michigan.
It certainly will be. He's going to talk about Muskegon, where a town that normally had about 250 new registrations for new voters had 10,000. The FBI picked it up, the Michigan State Police picked it up, but somehow that investigation died on the vine. Well, during his primetime speech here 10 days ago or so, the president said, we need to look back into Muskegon. You need to look at the TCF Center. You need to figure out how these votes were cast, what it meant. Was there an impact on the election? How did it play out here? Well, that investigation in Muskegon, which is a city on the west side of the state on Lake Michigan, not a very big city, comparatively speaking, to other towns around this country, but 10,000 new registrations, roughly, in a place where the clerk normally saw about 250 or 300 any given election year. I mean, that's not something to overlook. It's not something to bury. It's something to dig deeper into and find out what are the facts. Why did the Michigan State Police stop looking? Well, they were under the direction of Gretchen Whitmer. There'd be one reason. Why did the DOJ stop looking? Well, they're under the direction of Joe Biden and his DOJ. There's a reason. We need to find out what the facts are on the ground here in Michigan. And that's just one example, of course. Something else that the president's doing here, Jack, pretty clearly. He's been in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan. He's going to all the swing states that he still thinks are key to the midterm election. And, of course, you've got this big convention coming up on the 9th and 10th of September in Texas to reinvigorate the Republicans, doing something that hasn't been done before. He's throwing out the old playbook. He's doing something new every stop. He really wants to win these midterms. It's clear by the work that he's putting in.
No, there's no question. He also visited Arizona recently and spoke with Turning Point USA. So again, another one of those key swing states. Steve, of course, we'll go right back to you as soon as we can. The president coming up. That's all the time we have, though, for Human Events Daily. So I will say, as always, ladies and gentlemen, you have my permission to lay ashore.